Hi, I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Welcome back to Archive Dive, a monthly podcast exploring Superior and Douglas County history. A going-out-of-business sale prompted the Roth Brothers to open their department store in Superior instead of Chippewa Falls. From 1889 to 1977, it offered a wide selection of items from paint to records, while its owners wove themselves into the fabric of the community. According to local historian Teddie Meronek, growing up in the area, everybody knew Roths. Hi, Teddie.
Hi,
Thanks
Maria.
for being here.
Thank you.
So, apparently this store was not supposed to be in Superior?
No, it was going to be in Chippewa Falls.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about the background of the Roth Brothers.
Well, they had been born in southern Wisconsin, and then they had an uncle who owned a general store type of store in the Dakota Territory at that time. So they went there to work for him, and after a while, they decided to open their own store. And it was successful enough that they were able to open another one. And then they decided to go on and, seek out new places to open a store. And they knew they were going to do it in Wisconsin. And they had several places that they thought would be a possibility for a store. And TJ, one of the brothers, decided to visit several of these cities. And he got to Chippewa Falls and he thought, it's a booming town. This is where we're going to open the store. And he had a lease signed for the building and everything. And then he thought, well, I was going to look at both Superior and Ashland. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'll just go look at those cities and then, go back to Chippewa and start the process of opening the store. He went to Ashland, and then his last stop was Superior. And he got to Superior in 1889. Well, Superior was starting to boom in 1889. And he found this store on the north end of Tower Avenue, and it was run by the Bradford brothers, and they were going out of business, and they were selling their stock and the store. And he went in there and made them an offer, and it wasn't as much as they wanted, but he said, well, what if we flip a coin, and if it's heads, I'll pay the price you ask, and if it's tails, you'll pay my price. I think he ended up paying their price, but he bought everything.
What was the name of the store?
It was called the Beehive Bazaar.
The Beehive Bazaar.
So Ross was known by that name for many, many years. So his brother came to Superior, and they opened the store, and it was successful from almost the moment they opened it. Well, it was a booming town, and I'm sure, they'd had experience in running general stores, so they knew what people wanted. And in fact, TJ said that when he stood outside their store at 6th and Tower, he looked down Tower Avenue, and the only thing he could see was the Hotel Superior, which was on what is now Belknap and Tower. There were no buildings.
So they were early.
The boom was just about to begin, yes.
Oh.
And they moved around in the early days in North Tower. They started out on North 6th, moved into another store, North 5th, then into another store. And, the business just kept growing.
Okay, excellent. Most people in the area would know it from one of two different sites, though, right?
Probably most everyone would know it from the site at 14th and Tower.
14th and Tower, which is now the...
Herbert's and Gerbert's.
Where Herbert's and Gerbert's is, okay.
But at one time they were at the corner of Broadway and Tower. Oh. And that was their biggest leap as far as, moving to a different site and into a much larger building. People may remember that building as the Labor Temple. That was what it was towards the end. It had also been the Great Northern Block. But in the beginning, it was Roth Brothers. It was built by people from Chicago, some investors. Okay. I thought originally the Roths had built it, but it sounded like it was built by investors from Chicago. And it was designed by Carl Worth, who was architect of almost all of downtown Superior, the early days. He did the Grand Opera House. Mm-hmm. Some examples of buildings he designed are still with us. One of them is Globe News.
Oh. He
was the architect. Roosevelt Terrace was designed by Carl Worth.
Okay, but he also designed that Roth building.
He designed the building, and they moved in 2 floors. In the beginning, they shared the building with a couple other businesses, but I think they moved out quickly because Roths just boomed at that site, absolutely boomed. They sold everything you needed, everything. And their business just kept growing. I think during Christmas, they even hired a sleigh that would deliver packages to your house.
What?
If you had, purchased something that you couldn't carry home, they would send it home on a sleigh for you.
Was Santa in the sleigh?
I don't know. That would have been a good promo idea there. And then in 1911, tragedy struck because the huge fire, $200,000 fire in a building that had been built for like $40,000 or $50,000 at the time. But the content, of course, just escalated the amount that was lost.
Right. But they didn't move, right?
They didn't move.
What did they do?
It was a terrible fire. Instead, they built on a third floor.
Fixed it up and built on a third floor?
Fixed it up and built on a third floor in 1911. There's just, amazing pictures from that fire that I'm sure people, if they saw them, they would know they had seen them before. And then they made it a bigger and better store. They even included groceries in it. And a soda fountain, and they had like 300 items on the menu. It was sort of a soda fountain
restaurant,
little cafe. Yeah,
okay.
They had over 300 items on the menu. Had gotten somebody in who was, I guess, a name in the business, in the soda fountain business, to dispense the sodas. And I think this was in the first store, and they had improved it in the second. But they had the first public restroom. And I thought in the beginning that by restroom they meant it was a bathroom, but it was a place where you could go, and they had a desk and you could write letters, and they had a couch and you could lounge or take a nap or something. And then I also read that people would eat their lunches in there.
In the bathroom?
Yes. People came from all over just to see it.
To see, okay, because a public restroom at that time
was
a
not.
Novelty?
Yeah, it was a novelty. And the other thing it had, which I just discovered, it didn't have one elevator, it had 2 elevators. And this is funny, but people who talk to me about Roth Brothers, the Roth Brothers store that was on 14th and Tower, the first thing they always mention is the elevator.
Why?
I don't know. But in this store, they had 2.
Okay. And it wasn't an elevator where you just walk in and press the button,
No,
right?
No, somebody would run it for you, yes.
Okay, so they had a full-time employee sitting there in the elevator.
Elevators, yes, and they had 2 of them there.
Wow, so they had 2 employees, one for each.
So then they stayed there until 1926, and I believe that was for a number of reasons why they decided to move. It was a huge store. And by 1926, I think TJ was probably in his 50s, but his brother had gotten ill. He was sick for about 7 years before he died, so probably about 3 or 4 years before they decided to move the store. He'd gotten ill, and so TJ was running the operation by himself. But he said what he did was send out like questionnaires to people, all his customers. Did they want the store to stay in its present location or move further south down Tower? And he said overwhelmingly people said they wanted it to move down Tower. And that was probably because everything was shifting south. The oldest businesses were closing in the North End. There were a lot of, taverns that were opening up in the North End. And it was more of a working community. It was down near the waterfront. So that's what was going on there. So this was a big leap. It had been a big leap for him just to move, as he said, past the Omaha tracks to Broadway and Tower. But this was going to be even a bigger leap for him.
And it was a smaller building they moved into.
It was a smaller building, but it was a building that had been built for a department store by Lightbody Wingate, who had been in business for many years, not as long as the Roths, but for a long time. And their business was in the old Truax block, which was on the corner of 11th and Tower. So it was only a block away from the new Roth Brothers when they opened on Broadway and Tower. So that may have given them the idea maybe they should move further away from where Roth's was. So they built this building at 14th and Tower for a department store. And it was still a large store, but certainly not as big as the one that they were leaving.
Okay. And it had 1 elevator, not 2.
It had 1 elevator, yes. That went to the basement, the first floor, the mezzanine, and then the second floor. But Roth's always had, it seemed to me, for many, many years, over 100 employees.
Wow.
When you think about it, that's a lot for Superior.
Yes,
Yeah.
and people saw them a lot. They were there in the store, right?
Right,
It wasn't just like they were running it from their corporate headquarters or
No,
something.
that's what's so different. I was thinking about that yesterday, about how TJ especially was very involved in the community. I mean, at the time of his death, he was head of the local chapter of the American Red Cross. He was involved in the Rotary Club. He was someone that you saw in church, you saw out and about. And I also read that he would sometimes, when it was snowing, stand outside the front door and brush the snow off people's coats before they came in the store. He was very generous, I think, with his time and offering Roth Brothers for people to use if they were collecting money during World War II, or because he died just before World War II. But he was very generous and very community spirited, I think. And he was actually, people say that he was the person who sort of brought flowers to Superior.
Brought flowers to
Yes.
Superior?
He's credited with really getting people to garden because he, of course, would have salesmen coming through the store. And he said one year during the worst snowstorm of the year, this salesman came through selling rose bushes, and he convinced TJ to buy them. And TJ thought, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to sell these because people just don't think flowers like this can grow in the Northland. And the salesman assured him, well, they sat in the basement for a while, blah, blah, blah. He sold them for so much money. And then he decided to, put a sale price on them. And so he guaranteed, I think he sold them for 25 cents a bush, and he guaranteed that if they didn't grow, people would get their money back. Oh. And it just took off. Apparently they were hardy for this part of the country, and everybody started buying them. And he also was one of the first department stores or businesses that started selling seeds, flower seeds.
Really?
And, he pushed those. But he himself, at his house at 18th and Hammond, in the backyard, he had 60 different varieties of trees. Trees. Wow. I try to figure that out when I, have gone by the house thinking, I wonder how he did that.
You need a lot of room for 60 trees.
Yeah, I know. But he was an interesting guy.
Yes. Wasn't he instrumental in putting boulevards into Hammond Avenue also? Was he part of the city council at the time, or was it just something that
I think it was just something he was passionate about, yeah. He, along with the garden clubs, of course, really pushed for that. And it was beautiful. I don't remember them. That's funny. I know they were taken out in the 60s, but I don't remember them. But I've seen pictures, and it was lovely. They had them on Hammond and Grand.
So even after TJ's death, Roth continued?
Right. After he died in 1941, and his son-in-law took over, Neil Smith. He was married to one of TJ's daughters, and he guided it through until, I don't remember when he stepped down, but then his son, Ted Smith Sr., took over running Roth's until the end. It was a very family-oriented business.
Okay.
They were all involved. And I have to say, during World War II, if you go and you look at the ads, that's one of my favorite pastimes, is to look at the Roth Brothers ads during World War II, because they're so well done, considering the limitations you had on what you could do as far as design. No color printing. There was never color in the newspaper. It was all black and white. But he must have had a wonderful, designer working for him to design these ads, because they were often focused specifically on Superior, too, or Douglas County, where, he would aim the ads towards what, people wanted. One time they did this ad about all the things that were made in Wisconsin that they had available in the store for sale. And they were also doing display windows just with items that had been made in Wisconsin. And they had great windows on Tower Avenue in that store, down Tower, and then 14th too on the side.
They involved the community in their advertising too, didn't they?
Right.
They had some interesting things that they put out there and asked for people to step up.
Yes, right? During World War II, they asked for women to donate their nylons and their silk stockings, if they couldn't wear them anymore. And they were going to the war effort. They were going to make some sort of bags for ammunition or something, and then also, of course, for parachutes out of the silk stockings. They also had a collection box where they asked people to bring in books that they could send to the soldiers. Oh. They were very community-minded. And they also had, I thought it was interesting too, in the early days when they were on Broadway and Tower, if people came to their store from out of town, if they took the train to Superior and they came to Roth's, if they bought, I can't remember how much it was, Roth Brothers would pay their train fare one way. If they purchased more items, they would get a round-trip ticket.
Oh.
So.
And they were right by the train station.
They were,
too,
yeah,
so.
when they were at Broadway and Tower.
Okay.
So.
Wasn't there one ad that they did? They were looking for a couple who was married at a certain time.
Mm-hmm. They were looking for a couple that had been married around the same time that they had opened their first store in Superior. Mm-hmm. And they were offering gifts, and they didn't limit it to just Superior or Douglas County. They got them from a lot of other places, and they finally did find somebody who was close to when, because by then it was, you had to have been married quite a long time. It was over 50 years, I believe. But every year they would have a big anniversary sale around the time when they opened their first store in Superior.
Okay. What are some of your memories of Roth's?
Well, I don't remember the elevator as well as some other people do.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't have sort of the cachet for me that it has for other people. But I just remember going there and knowing that you could buy anything you wanted. If you needed a birthday card, it was there. If you needed perfume or makeup, it was there. And you could go upstairs and get something new to wear. You could also go get your hair done. They had a beauty salon.
Department store?
Yeah, they had the beauty salon there. And I don't know, it was such an icon, I think, almost, that in something that has totally disappeared from our small towns. Small town department stores that are independently owned. Even department stores are disappearing. Mm-hmm. But it was always there. And I think it was crushed when it closed.
Yes.
Because where were we going to go now? Well, we were going to go to the malls.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then it switched back to more department stores.
I know. It's just funny how the cyclical nature of it, Now, malls are disappearing.
Mm-hmm. And you're looking for smaller independent shops.
Mm-hmm.
So business is always evolving.
Right. Yeah. And I wonder what TJ would think about that. He'd probably have an idea.
I bet he would.
Yeah. But I think people are very sentimental about it, because my mother bought the material for her wedding dress at Roth's. Mm. And my sister got her wedding china at Roth's. And you talk to people and they can remember, like maybe they got their first communion dress there or something like that. There's something sentimental that ties you to that store, that your mother went there, maybe your grandmother, and you were shopping there. So, and then that was all gone. They closed in 1977, or announced they're closing in 77, and then had their last few sales in 78. I recently read an article about a woman who worked there for 60 years.
60 years?
60 years.
Did she run the elevator?
No, she didn't.
I know you have a friend who says she would like to be an elevator operator, right?
Oh, that was her dream job, to operate the elevator at Roth's. I think it would have been incredibly boring, but maybe not. I bet you would hear a lot of stories.
Mm-hmm. You meet a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't know. It's sad in a way that towns can't support a store like that anymore, but the internet's sort of taken over all of that business. I don't know what'll happen next. What will take over the internet?
I don't know.
I don't know either. It's amazing that someone could stay in town, in business that long, continually, and then pass it on to next generation, and then have that generation pass it on to a next generation.
So it was a three-generation
Three-generation
store.
Thing, yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow. And there was a need they were able to adapt to the changing needs.
Yeah. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
Now, the building itself is no longer there. That building, the last Roth building?
Both of the last two places that Roth's was in, both were destroyed by fire. The Labor Temple building went down in, I think, about 98. I don't know if they ever discovered what happened. It was thought at first that maybe it was arson, and then the newer building on 14th and Tower, that was destroyed by fire sometime in the early 2000s. So,
right.
But there's something rebuilt on that spot now. Of course, the Herberts and Gerberts building is there. Yeah.
I wonder who would have come in if it hadn't been them.
Well, I don't know. I just don't know. I'm glad there's a building there. You don't need another empty tooth on Tower Avenue. So
there were no other Roths. It wasn't like a chain.
No. They never expanded outside of Superior. And there were other department stores in town at the time, like Stack's.
Okay.
But that didn't last as long as Roth's did.
What made Roth's stand out from the others?
I don't know. I don't know if it was their advertising or was it the whole, community thing. Although, other stores certainly did do that too. But I don't know if it was TJ's presence in town and belonging to all the civic organizations and things like that.
Or maybe a generational thing. Well, this is where I came when I was a kid, so here's where I'm going
That could be too, but you could always find everything there.
You even wrote a play about it, right?
I even wrote a play about it.
How did people like it?
People loved it. I was very surprised. But I thought it's good to write about something that you look back at with fondness, because you probably know that other people look back at it the same way. And I think that was mostly the response I got was, oh, I remember that. It was a part of my life. So you're telling the story of something they know. And it was fun. And I could just make things up.
So it was not a historically accurate play.
No. But I did find out, since I wrote it about a woman who was in advertising there, she was the one who designed their ads. I had no idea who did the ads or did any of that at the time. But then after the play had been produced, I found an article in the newspaper that indeed there was a woman in the 1950s who had headed up their advertising department and won an award. So you just never know.
Oh, right. You thought it was fiction, but
it was the truth, yeah. It was just fun. As I said, it was so sentimental to me that I just knew other people would feel the same way about it.
Right. And it's had 2 different runs, right?
Two different runs,
been well received both times.
Yeah. Next time I'll take it to Broadway.
Woohoo! There you go.
I don't think so. I am going to write a sequel, though.
Are you?
Yes.
Here's more that you can find at Roth's?
I don't know what the title will be, but it's going to be set in the 1960s.
Oh, towards the end of, okay.
Yeah, mostly because the cast is getting older.
All right, we'll revisit and see where they are.
Yeah, right,
point.
see where they are, 15 years later.
Thank you very much, Teddie.
You're welcome, Maria.
And thanks for listening to Archive Dive. New episodes are available monthly at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, email me at mlockwood@superiortelegram.com.
The Superior Telegram is proud to be part of the Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org.